Welcome to the story of India, a journey of thousands of years, from ancient tools to modern technology, from great empires to freedom movements. This is the story of a civilization that never stopped moving forward. Episode 1: Prehistoric India and the Indus Valley Civilization. Before cities, before kings, before writing, there were people who walked, hunted, cooked, and told stories. This is the story of India before India. The land, the people, and the lost cities that time forgot. The story begins over 2 million years ago. The first humans came to what we now call India during the lower Paleolithic period. It didn't have houses or farming. They used stones to hunt animals. They lived near rivers and forests, places where food and water were easy to find. These early people moved a lot. They didn't stay in one place for long. They followed the animals and seasons. This is why we call them hunter-gatherers. They didn't know they were starting history. They were just looking for food and shelter. These people didn't build houses. They didn't grow crops or raise animals. Instead, they lived like the animals around them, wild, free, and always moving. They made tools from stone, sharp edges to cut meat or skin animals, not for beauty, but to survive. They followed rivers because rivers meant life, water to drink, fish to catch, animals to hunt. They stayed near forests where berries grew and wood could be found. They watched the skies. They listened to the sounds of animals. They learned from the land, and they passed this knowledge from one generation to the next, not with books, but with stories. These were the hunter-gatherers. They hunted with sharp stones, chased wild animals across open plains. They gathered roots and fruits, learning which plants healed and which ones harmed. And they never stayed in one place for too long. When food ran out, they moved. When seasons changed, they followed the animals. They didn't own land. They didn't build walls. The world was open and they moved through it like the wind. They didn't know they were making history, but every step they took brought us closer to what India would become. Around 9,000 years ago, something changed. The winds still blew through the forests. The rivers still flowed quietly through the land. But the people, they stopped running. For the first time, humans in this land began to settle down. They discovered that the seeds they gathered, if dropped into the soil, could grow into food. It wasn't magic, it was farming. They began to plant wheat, barley, and lentils in the soil. They learned when to sow and when to harvest by watching the skies, the sun, and the seasons. And they didn't stop there. They started domesticating animals, goats, sheep, and later cattle. These animals gave them milk, meat, wool, and help with carrying loads. This new way of life changed everything. Now people didn't need to keep moving. They could stay in one place because the food came to them. They built small villages made from mud, wood, and straw. Homes were simple, just 1 or 2 rooms, but they had warmth and a roof to sleep under. In these villages, families grew. Children played in the dust. Fires cooked warm meals. People stored grains in clay pots, and shared stories by firelight, life became more stable, but also more complicated. When people started owning land, they had to protect it. When food was stored, it had to be guarded. And when people lived close together, they had disagreements. They needed rules, they needed leaders, they needed order. And so, something new was born: society. This was no longer just survival, it was a start of community, of cooperation, of civilization. What began with a few seeds in the soil would one day grow into cities, kingdoms, and empires. This was the first spark, and India was just beginning to wake up. Then came a truly amazing time in India's history. Around 3300 BCE, over 5,000 years ago, people in this land did something incredible. They built cities, not just huts or small villages, but real cities with roads, with drainage systems, with public buildings and marketplaces. This was the beginning of what we now call the Indus Valley Civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, named after one of its first discovered cities, Harappa. It stretched along the Indus River and its smaller branches across what is today Pakistan and northwest India. And it was huge. Cities like Mohenjo-Daro, Dholavira, Lothal, and Rakhigarhi rose from the earth like stone puzzles, carefully planned by ancient minds. But what made this civilization so special? Let's take a closer look. The cities were built with mathematical precision. They had straight roads that crossed each other like a giant grid, like modern cities today. The homes were made from baked bricks, strong, square, and uniform. Most houses had courtyards, flat roofs, and even private bathrooms connected to drains. Yes, even 5,000 years ago, they had indoor plumbing. Underground drainage systems ran beneath the streets, carrying waste away from homes and public paths. At Mohenjo-Daro, there was a huge structure we now call the Great Bath, possibly used for rituals or maybe just community bathing. Whatever it was for, it shows how advanced and organized they were. But that's not all. The people of the Indus Valley were skilled traders. They used standardized weights and measures. They made seals with beautiful animal carvings and unknown symbols, maybe a form of writing we still don't fully understand today. They traded with Mesopotamia, far across deserts and seas. Their goods traveled. Their ideas spread. They were not isolated. They were connected. And yet, there were no giant palaces, no obvious kings, no huge temples. It seems they lived in a society where no one person was above all, a culture that valued order, balance, and maybe equality. But like all great stories, this too would change. Because one day, without war, without fire, without a clear reason, the cities went quiet. The Indus Valley civilization began to decline. Was it climate change? Did the rivers dry up or change course? Or was it something else entirely? We still don't fully know. But what we do know is that the spirit of order, of design, of peaceful life left a mark. And in the centuries that followed, new cultures would rise, new stories would begin, and the land that once held Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro would soon hear the chants of the Vedas. Among all the treasures left behind by the Indus Valley people, there's one that still keeps its secrets, a mystery carved in stone, stamped on clay, etched onto tiny seals, a writing system, but not one we can read. These were not letters like A, B or C. They weren't like the characters of Chinese or the alphabets of Latin or Greek. They were symbols. Some looked like animals, a fish, a bull, a bird. Others looked like shapes or lines, maybe sounds, maybe meanings. We've found hundreds of them on seals, on pottery, on tools. Some are as small as a coin. Some are worn from time. Each seal tells us something, but not with words we can understand. Because here's the puzzle. No one on earth has been able to read the Indus script. We don't know what these people call themselves. We don't know the names of their kings or their gods or their stories. Were they writing about trade, prayers, laws? We don't know. Why? Because there is no Rosetta Stone, no translation, no long inscriptions to help decode it. The symbols are short, usually just 3 to 5 characters, too little for patterns, too little for clear meaning. And time has made it harder. The language behind the script, lost. The sounds they spoke, forgotten. Even today, scholars debate, was it a full language, a list of names, or maybe even a kind of sacred code? Over 100 years after their discovery, the script of the Indus Valley remains silent. A voice from the past we still can't hear. But even in silence, it speaks loudly. It tells us that these were thinking people. People who had something to say, something to record, something to remember. And maybe one day we will finally understand what they tried to tell us. Until then, the symbols remain like a locked diary of one of the world's oldest civilizations, waiting for the key. The Indus people were not alone. They were connected. Over 4,000 years ago, they traded with Mesopotamia, more than 3,000 kilometers away. Archaeologists have found Indus seals in ancient Mesopotamian cities, small carved stones with animals and symbols. These were like signatures of trade. So what did they send? From the Indus came beads of shining carnelian, soft cotton cloth, the first cotton in the world, painted pottery, and jewelry made of gold, silver, and stone. And in return, they received metals, tin for bronze, copper for tools, and luxury goods from faraway lands. Imagine that. Boats sailing across the Arabian Sea, caravans crossing deserts, goods moving from one civilization to another. This was not a simple village. This was a world connected, a global trade network 4,000 years before today. Around 1900 BCE, something changed. The mighty cities of the Indus Valley began to fall silent. Streets that once echoed with traders, potters, and children were abandoned. The writing system, so mysterious, suddenly stopped. No more seals, no more records. The great trade that once connected India to Mesopotamia collapsed. Why? That is still a mystery. Some believe it was climate change. The great Saraswati River, the lifeline of the people, slowly dried up. Others point to earthquakes that shifted rivers or floods that destroyed crops. The monsoons may have changed, bringing too little rain or far too much. Some old theories even spoke of invasion, but evidence for that is weak. There are no signs of massive battles or destruction. What we do know is this: something happened that the people could not control, and slowly, one by one, the great cities of Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro were abandoned. For centuries, their story was forgotten, buried under dust and sand, until modern archaeologists uncovered their ruins once again. Before kings and temples, before Sanskrit and scriptures, there was the Indus Valley civilization, a people who built clean streets, smart drainage systems, and peaceful cities 4,000 years ago. They left behind no grand palaces, no giant statues, no stories written in books, and yet their achievements whisper through the bricks they laid, the beads they carved, the seals they pressed with care. The Indus reminds us of a truth bigger than time itself. Civilizations rise, civilizations fall, but they never truly disappear. Their bricks still lie under modern streets. In cities like Harappa and Mohenjo-Daro, their spirit lives in the cotton we wear, in the trade that still connects nations, in the rivers that still give life to millions. The Indus Valley is not just a forgotten past, it is a reminder, a puzzle, a message from history. The secrets are waiting, still buried, to be discovered. Episode 2: The Vedic Age and the Rise of Kingdoms. When the great cities of the Indus fell silent, a new chapter began. Around 1500 BCE, new people entered India from the northwest. They called themselves Arya, the noble ones. Today, we call them the Aryans. They brought with them horses, chariots, new gods, and a language that would shape Indian culture for thousands of years: Sanskrit. This was the start of what we call the Vedic age. The word Veda means knowledge. The Vedas were collections of hymns, poems sung to the gods. They spoke of a world where nature itself was divine. Indra, the thunderbolt warrior; Agni, the sacred fire; Surya, the life-giving sun. To the Aryans, the sky, the rivers, the wind, all had power. Life was simple. People lived in small tribes, led by chiefs called Rajas. They kept cattle, moved with the seasons, and saw cows as wealth itself. But beneath this simplicity, change was coming. By 1000 BCE, the Aryans began to settle down. They cleared forests with new iron tools. They planted fields, built villages, and grew. Food became plentiful, populations rose, and with growth came hierarchy. Society divided itself into 4 varnas, or classes. At the top, the Brahmins, priests, and keepers of ritual. Then, the Kshatriyas, warriors and rulers. Next, the Vaishyas, farmers and traders. And at the bottom, the Shudras, servants and laborers. Some people were outside this system entirely, treated as untouchable. This inequality would shape India for centuries. By 600 BCE, the landscape of India had changed again. Small tribes had grown into great states called the Mahajanapadas, with 16 in all. Some were republics like Vaishali, where leaders were elected. Others were monarchies with mighty kings and armies. Among them, one stood out: Magadha. Magadha's fertile land, iron-rich soil, and strategic rivers made it a rising power. From here, the first great empires of India would soon be born. As cities expanded, wealth and power grew. But so did questions. Why is there suffering? Why are some rich while others starve? What is the true purpose of life? From this search came two powerful answers. Buddhism, founded by a prince named Siddhartha Gautama, who became the Buddha, and Jainism, taught by Mahavira, who spoke of truth and non-violence. Their teachings challenged the old order. They inspired millions, especially those oppressed by the caste system, and they would spread far beyond India's borders. The Vedic age gave India its earliest sacred texts, its first spoken literature, the roots of Hinduism, the Sanskrit language, and the seeds of kingdoms that would soon unite under great empires. It was an age of transformation, from wandering tribes to powerful states, from nature gods to deep philosophies. The stage was set for one of the greatest rulers in history and the first empire to bind India together. But that is the story of the Maurya Empire. Episode 3: The Maurya Empire and Ashoka the Great. A powerful king, a vast empire, and a war that changed everything. This is the story of India's first great empire, the Maurya Empire, and the man who made it unforgettable, Ashoka the Great. Our journey begins in 322 BCE. India was a land of many kingdoms, fighting, rising, and falling. In the middle of this chaos stood a young man with a dream, Chandragupta Maurya. He was not a prince, not born into power, but he had ambition and a brilliant mind by his side. Chanakya, a teacher, a strategist, a man who believed one person could change the world. Together, they built an army. Together, they toppled the mighty kingdom of Magadha. And when Alexander the Great's general Seleucus marched into India, Chandragupta defeated him too. This was no ordinary victory. From Afghanistan in the west to Bengal in the east, from the Himalayas in the north to the Deccan Plateau in the south, Chandragupta had forged the Maurya Empire, India's first great empire. What was life like in this empire? The capital, Pataliputra, today's Patna, was a marvel. Massive walls surrounded it. Watchtowers guarded its gates. Inside were busy markets, scholars debating ideas, and royal halls where laws were made. Chandragupta's government was organized. Strong armies defended its borders. Roads and trade routes connected cities. Taxes funded public works. And spies kept watch, because in a vast empire, danger is always near. Later in life, Chandragupta gave up his throne. He followed Jainism, seeking peace and non-violence. His son, Bindusara, became king, but the true legend was yet to rise. In 268 BCE, Ashoka, the grandson of Chandragupta, took the throne. At first, he was like many rulers of his time, ambitious, fierce, determined to expand his empire, and expand he did, until one battle changed him forever. The kingdom of Kalinga, modern Odisha, stood proud and free. Ashoka wanted it under his control. The war that followed was brutal. The rivers ran red with blood. Over 100,000 people died. Soldiers, farmers, women, children. Ashoka won. But when he walked through the battlefield and saw the devastation, the bodies, the grief, the silence of death, something inside him broke. He asked himself, is this victory? Or is this madness? From that moment, Ashoka changed. He turned away from war and embraced Buddhism. He chose compassion over conquest. Ashoka built hospitals for people and animals, wells and rest houses for travelers, schools and gardens for learning and peace. And across his empire, he carved his new vision into stone pillars and rocks. Ashoka's edicts. They said, respect all religions, be kind to all beings, speak the truth. Anger leads to sorrow. These messages stood tall, where villagers could see them, where travelers could read them. They were reminders that power can be gentle and strength can be kind. Ashoka's influence reached far beyond India. He sent Buddhist monks to Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Thailand, even as far as Greece and Egypt. Buddhism became a world religion, carrying Ashoka's dream of peace across Asia. Today, India's national symbol, the four lions on the Ashokan pillar, still honors him. When Ashoka died, the Maurya Empire slowly faded. Smaller kingdoms rose again, but Ashoka's message survived the fall of his empire. He is remembered as a conqueror who chose compassion, a king who turned from bloodshed to wisdom, a leader whose words still inspire humanity 2000 years later. This was the Maurya Empire. This was Ashoka the Great, proof that even in the darkest times, change is possible, and one person can light a path for the world. Episode 4: The Gupta Empire, India's Golden Age. In history, some periods shine brighter than others. For ancient India, one of its brightest came during the Gupta Empire. This was a time of peace, of learning, of art and science, a time when India reached for the stars. But how did this golden age begin, and why does it still matter today? Let's find out. After the fall of the Maurya Empire, India was divided. For centuries, small kingdoms rose and fell. No Ashoka, no great ruler to unite the land. But around the 3rd century CE, a new dynasty emerged in northern India, the Guptas. Their first great leader was Chandragupta I, not the Mauryan king, another Chandragupta. He called himself Maharaja, King of Kings. He built alliances through marriage, expanding his power without constant war. His son, Samudragupta, would take things further. Samudragupta was a warrior. His coins show him with a sword in one hand and a harp in the other. He conquered with strength but ruled with culture. Under him, the Guptas became more than a kingdom. They became a rising empire. The true glory of the Guptas came under Chandragupta II, also called Vikramaditya. His reign marked what we now call India's Golden Age. Why? Because in this time, ideas flourished like never before. Mathematics. Indian scholars gave the world something revolutionary, the number 0. Without it, modern math would not exist. Astronomers like Aryabhata calculated eclipses, even hinted at gravity, centuries before Europe. Medicine, doctors wrote about surgery, diseases, and cures using herbs. They practiced techniques that would not reach the West for hundreds of years. Literature. The poet Kalidasa wrote plays like Shakuntala, still admired today. Sanskrit became the language of learning and art. Art and architecture. Stone temples rose, covered in detailed carvings. In caves like Ajanta, artists painted vibrant scenes of gods, kings, and everyday life. This was not just a time of kings, it was a time of knowledge. The Guptas supported Hinduism, building temples to Vishnu and Shiva. But they also welcomed Buddhism and Jainism. This was an age of tolerance. Pilgrims from China, like Faxian, wrote of peaceful cities, fair laws, and prosperity. Society was organized into castes, Brahmins at the top, then warriors, merchants, and laborers. Women still had education in some places, but over time their freedoms began to shrink. Trade boomed. Indian silk, spices, and jewels traveled as far as Rome. Ships and caravans carried not just goods, but ideas, spreading Indian science and culture across Asia. But no golden age lasts forever. After Chandragupta II, weaker rulers struggled to hold the empire together. Then came the Hunas, nomadic invaders from Central Asia. They attacked and the empire fractured. By the late 6th century CE, the Gupta Empire was gone. India entered another period of division. Yet, its legacy endured. Its mathematics, its art, its spirit of learning. The world would carry these gifts forward. The Gupta Empire was more than battles and kings. It was about ideas, ideas that shaped India and influenced the world. It reminds us that even when empires fall, knowledge lives on. Next time, we enter a new chapter, a time of new faiths, new rulers, and new challenges. The arrival of Islam in India and the rise of the Delhi Sultanate. The golden age had ended, but history was far from over. Episode 5: The Arrival of Islam and the Delhi Sultanate. Long before the Mughals, long before the Taj Mahal, another empire ruled from Delhi. It was an age of warriors and poets, of destruction and creation, of faith and power colliding. This is the story of how Islam came to India and how the Delhi Sultanate rose to dominate the north. The year is 622 CE. Far away, in Arabia, a new faith is born, Islam. Within a century, it spreads across deserts and mountains, across Persia and Central Asia, until finally its ships reach the western shores of India. Here, in bustling ports like Kerala and Gujarat, Arab traders arrive with spices, horses, and a new religion. At first, there is no conquest, just trade, just faith, carried on the waves. But soon, the tide will change. By the early 700s, a young Arab general named Muhammad bin Qasim marches into Sindh in today's Pakistan. He defeats the Hindu ruler Tahir, bringing Sindh briefly under Islamic rule. It does not last long, but the door is now open. The idea of India as a land to conquer has begun. For centuries, waves of raiders will cross the northwestern passes, each one leaving a mark. Among them, one name strikes fear and greed. Around the year 1000, a ruler named Mahmud of Ghazni sets his eyes on India. He comes not to stay, but to take. 17 times he invades, 17 times he loots temples, cities, and riches beyond imagination. The great temple of Somnath, its gold stripped, its treasures hauled to Ghazni. To some, Mahmud is a hero spreading faith. To many in India, he is remembered as a destroyer. But he does not build an empire here that will come with another man. In 1192, a battle changes India forever. At Tarain, a fierce Rajput king, Prithviraj Chauhan, faces Muhammad Ghori, a ruler from Afghanistan. The Rajputs fight bravely, but Ghori wins. This victory is different. Ghori does not loot and leave. He stays. His general Qutbuddin Aibak soon becomes the first Sultan of Delhi. A new era begins, the Delhi Sultanate. From 1206 to 1526, Delhi is the beating heart of northern India. 5 dynasties rise and fall: the Mamluks, Khiljis, Tughlaqs, Sayyids, and Lodis. Each brings war, power, and transformation. Qutbuddin Aibak, the builder. A former slave turned ruler, Aibak begins construction of the Qutba Minar. Today, a UNESCO World Heritage Site, it stands as a symbol of conquest and legacy. Alauddin Khilji, the conqueror, fierce, ambitious, ruthless. Alauddin defeats Mongol invasions, reforms markets to control prices, and expands deep into southern India. Under him, Delhi grows rich and feared. Muhammad bin Tughlaq, the visionary and the mad king, brilliant in ideas, disastrous in execution. He tries to move the capital 1,500 kilometers south to Daulatabad, forcing thousands to march across India. He introduces new coins that fail. His reign is remembered for both genius and chaos. Firoz Shah Tughlaq, the builder of peace. Unlike others, Firoz focuses on welfare, building canals, schools, hospitals. His Delhi prospers. Ibrahim Lodi, the last sultan. But by the early 1500s, the Sultanate is weak. Corruption, rebellions, and new enemies surround it. The Delhi Sultanate is more than battles. It changes India's very soul. Persian becomes the language of administration and poetry. Architecture transforms. Arches, domes, and grand mosques rise alongside temples. Two spiritual movements flourish: Sufism, preaching love and devotion to God beyond rituals, and Bhakti, Hindu saints singing of unity and equality. Despite tensions between faiths, a new Indo-Islamic culture takes root, one that still shapes India today. In 1526, a new challenger arrives, Babur, a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan. At Panipat, his cannons roar. Ibrahim Lodi's army collapses. The Delhi Sultanate falls. The Mughal Empire rises. But the story of the Sultanate lives on in its cities, its art, and the very fabric of India. The Delhi Sultanate was not just a kingdom. It was a crossroads of worlds. It brought war, but also new ideas. It created conflict, but also new cultures. It is a reminder that history is rarely simple. It is pain and progress, destruction and creation. And in the heart of Delhi, beneath the minarets and ruins, its echoes still whisper. Episode 6: The Mughal Empire, a new era begins. The year is 1526. A new army marches into India. Its leader claims to be a descendant of Timur and Genghis Khan. He carries cannons, deadly weapons never seen in Indian battlefields before. His name? Babur. And with him begins one of the greatest empires in world history, the Mughal Empire. For over 300 years, the Mughals will shape India's art, culture, politics, and identity. They will build monuments that still amaze the world today. But they will also face wars, betrayals, and decline. This is their story. Babur, the founder. Babur was born in 1483 in present-day Uzbekistan. He was a skilled warrior and poet. Yes, a poet. But he dreamed of more. He wanted his own empire. He invaded northern India and met Ibrahim Lodi, the last Sultan of Delhi, at the first battle of Panipat, 1526. Lodi had elephants and a huge army. Babur had cannons. The battle was quick and brutal. The thunder of Babur's guns scared the elephants and crushed Lodi's forces. Delhi was Babur's. But Babur's reign was short. He died in 1530. His son Humayun inherited the throne, and soon lost it. Humayun faced strong rivals, especially Sher Shah Suri, a brilliant Afghan general. Sher Shah defeated Humayun and created his own empire for a while. He introduced reforms like a new road system, the Grand Trunk Road, still used today. Humayun wandered in exile for years, but with Persian help, he regained the throne in 1555, only to die the next year after a fall from the stairs of his library. His young son was left to rule, a boy of just 13. His name, Akbar. Akbar the Great. The empire expands. Akbar would become one of India's greatest rulers. He wasn't just a conqueror, he was a thinker. Military strength. Akbar's armies expanded the empire across most of northern and central India. Administration. He built a strong system of taxes, recruited talented officials, and even included Hindus in high positions. Tolerance. Akbar believed in respecting all religions. He ended special taxes on non-Muslims and invited scholars of all faiths to discuss ideas in his court. Culture. His capital, Fatehpur Sikri, became a center of art and learning. Painters, musicians, and poets thrived under his patronage. By the time Akbar died in 1605, the Mughal Empire was rich, powerful, and admired. After Akbar came his son, Jahangir, known for his love of art and nature. He married Nur Jahan, one of the most influential queens in history. Next came Shah Jahan, 1628 to 1658, the builder of the Taj Mahal, a white marble masterpiece built in memory of his wife, Mumtaz Mahal. Under him, Mughal architecture reached its peak. Grand forts, mosques, and gardens. But power brought problems. Shah Jahan's son, Aurangzeb, seized the throne in 1658. Aurangzeb expanded the empire to its largest size. But his strict policies, heavy taxes, and constant wars drained the empire's strength. After Aurangzeb's death in 1707, the Mughal Empire began to crumble. Weak rulers, invasions by Persians and Afghans, and the rise of new powers like the Marathas and the British slowly tore it apart. By the 1800s, the Mughals were emperors only in name, and in 1857, after the First War of Independence, the British ended the dynasty entirely. But the Mughal legacy lives on. Architecture, Taj Mahal, Red Fort, Humayun's tomb, culture, Urdu language, music, and cuisine. Ideas, tolerance, administration, and centralized governance. The Mughal Empire was not just about kings and battles, it was about fusion. A blending of Persian, Central Asian, and Indian cultures into something unique. It reminds us that empires rise and fall, but their stories remain. And in India, the story of the Mughals is written not only in books, but in stone, marble, and memory. Episode 7: The British Raj and the Freedom Struggle. In the early 1600s, British traders landed on India's shores. They set up factories in Surat, Madras, Bombay, and Calcutta. At first, they asked permission. Later, they gave orders. The turning point came in 1757 at the Battle of Plassey. Robert Clive, an officer of the company, defeated the Nawab of Bengal. With bribes and betrayal, one of India's richest provinces was lost. From here, the East India Company spread across India. They signed treaties, they fought wars, they raised armies of Indian soldiers, sepoys. But their rule was harsh. Farmers paid heavy taxes, villages starved, Indian industries collapsed under cheap British goods. The company's greed made them rich, but it left India poor. By 1857, anger was everywhere. The spark came from a new rifle cartridge said to be greased with cow and pig fat. To Hindu and Muslim soldiers, this was an insult. Sepoys in Meerut mutinied. The fire spread to Delhi, Kanpur, Lucknow. For a moment, hope returned. The rebels declared the old Mughal emperor Bahadur Shah Zafar as their leader. But the British struck back. With cannons and cruelty, the rebellion was crushed. Thousands were killed. Delhi was left in ruins. The dream failed, but the message was clear. India would not remain silent forever. After this, the East India Company was dissolved. In 1858, the British Crown took direct control. India was now under the Raj. The British built railways, telegraphs, universities, and courts. But these were not for Indians. They were for control. Cotton, tea, opium. India became a supplier of raw materials. British factories made the profits. Indian farmers starved. Famines swept the land. Millions died, while grain was still exported abroad. And yet, change was happening. A new class of Indians studied English, read modern science, and began to ask dangerous questions. Why should a foreign power rule us? In 1885, the Indian National Congress was born. At first, its leaders were polite. They asked for reforms, not freedom. But soon, voices grew louder. Dadabhai Naoroji exposed how Britain trained India's wealth. Bal Gangadhar Tilak thundered, "Swaraj is my birthright." The idea of freedom had begun. Then came a man who would change the struggle forever. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. Gandhi returned from South Africa in 1915. His weapon was not violence. It was truth. It was non-cooperation. He asked Indians to spin their own cloth, boycott British goods, refuse to obey unjust laws. When the British taxed salt, Gandhi marched 240 miles to the sea, lifted a pinch of salt, and broke the law. When the world was at war, Gandhi told the British, "Quit India." Millions followed him. Farmers, students, women, workers, all joined the struggle, but not all fought with peace. Bhagat Singh raised the flag of revolution. Subhas Chandra Bose built the Indian National Army. Muhammad Ali Jinnah demanded a separate homeland for Muslims. Jawaharlal Nehru dreamed of a modern united India. The struggle had many voices, but one goal: freedom. World War II weakened Britain. By 1947, the pressure was too great. The British agreed to leave. On the midnight of August 15, 1947, India awoke to freedom. But freedom came with pain. The land was divided into India and Pakistan. Partition brought riots, killings, and the largest migration in human history. Millions lost homes. Families were torn apart. Yet, through tears and fire, India was free. The British Raj lasted less than 200 years, but it changed India forever. It left behind railways and laws, but also scars of famine and division. It gave India English schools, but also inspired India's greatest struggle. And from this struggle came a truth. No empire is eternal, and no people remain enslaved forever. The story of the Raj and the freedom struggle is not just about rulers and rebels. It is about courage, about sacrifice, about the unbreakable spirit of a nation. Episode 8, Post-Independence India. August 15, 1947. At the stroke of midnight, India was free, the British were gone. The tricolor rose high, and a nation of 300 million people stood at the edge of a new beginning. But freedom was not easy. Partition had cut the land in two, India and Pakistan. Millions fled their homes. Families were broken. Violence filled the streets. This was the birth of independent India, full of hope but also heavy with pain. India's leaders faced a question. How do you unite a country so vast, so diverse, with so many languages, religions, and traditions? Jawaharlal Nehru became the first Prime Minister. He spoke of a vision of dams, factories, and schools that would build a modern India. Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India, united over 500 princely states into one nation. Without him, India might have broken apart. In 1950, India adopted its constitution. Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, its chief architect, gave India democracy, equality, and rights for all citizens. For the first time, the people, not kings, not emperors, would decide India's future. But freedom came with struggles. Poverty was everywhere. Millions had no land, no food, no jobs. Wars also tested India's strength. In 1947, 1965, and 1971, India fought with Pakistan. In 1962, India faced a war with China. Each war left scars, but also made India stronger. In 1971, after a bitter conflict, India helped create a new nation, Bangladesh. It was a moment of pride, but at home, politics turned tense. Indira Gandhi, Nehru's daughter, declared an emergency in 1975, suspending freedoms. It was a dark chapter, but democracy survived. Through the 1980s, India saw both progress and pain. New industries rose, science and space programs grew, but violence also spread. Punjab saw militancy, Assam saw unrest, and leaders like Indira Gandhi were assassinated. Her son, Rajiv Gandhi, became Prime Minister. He dreamed of taking India into the computer age, but he too was lost to violence. India was changing, sometimes fast, sometimes painfully. By 1991, India was in crisis. The economy was collapsing. Foreign reserves were almost empty. A bold decision was made. Liberalization, markets opened, trade expanded, foreign companies entered. Suddenly, India began to grow. Cities like Bangalore became hubs of technology. The middle class rose. Mobile phones, cars, and computers became common. A new India was emerging. Today, India is one of the world's largest democracies and one of its fastest growing economies. It has sent missions to the moon and Mars. It builds satellites, software, and startups. Yet challenges remain. Poverty, inequality, corruption, and communal tensions continue. But India is young. More than half its population is under 30. It is full of energy, ambition, and dreams. The story of post-independence India is not simple. It is a story of unity after division, of democracy tested but never broken, of poverty and struggle but also of progress and hope. From the ashes of Padechan, India rose. From hunger and crisis, it built strength. From an ancient civilization, it became a modern nation. And today, the journey is still going. Because India's story is not finished. It is only beginning. Episode 9, The Rise of Modern India, 2000s to Present. The year 2000. A new millennium began, and with it, a new India. The nation had survived wars, poverty, and political storms, but now It stood at the door of the 21st century, ready for change, ready for growth. This is the story of modern India, from the 2000s to today. In the early 2000s, something new was happening in Indian cities. Call centers, tech parks, and software companies were rising in Bangalore, Hyderabad, and Pune. India became the back office of the world. Young engineers, fluent in computers and English, powered global companies. Names like Infosys, Wipro, and TCS became famous. The world began to look at India not just as a land of villages, but as a land of technology. Politically, India was finding its balance. Coalition governments led the country until a stronger wave of leadership arrived later. In 1998, India had already tested nuclear weapons. By the 2000s, it was clear India was no longer just a regional power, it was rising on the global stage. The world began to see India as a democracy with strength. But growth also came with challenges. The 2004 tsunami hit India's coasts, killing thousands. The 2008 Mumbai terror attacks shocked the nation, showing how vulnerable big cities could be. Still, India stood tall. Every crisis seemed to test the country, and every time, India found a way to move forward. In 2014, India saw a big political change. Narendra Modi became Prime Minister, promising development and strong leadership. His government launched campaigns like Make in India, Digital India, and Swachh Bharat, a movement for cleanliness. India's image was changing again. Confident, ambitious, looking toward the future. At the same time, India was reaching for the stars, literally. In 2014, India sent a spacecraft to Mars on its very first attempt. It was one of the cheapest missions in history, but a great success. Later, missions like Chandrayaan reached the moon. India proved that even with limited resources, it could dream big and achieve even bigger. By the 2000s, life in India was transforming. Smartphones became common. The internet spread everywhere. Online shopping, digital payments, and apps became part of daily life. The middle class grew. Cities expanded. Yet, rural India still faced struggles. Lack of jobs, poverty, and migration to urban centers. It was a land of contrasts. Shining skyscrapers on one side, struggling farmers on the other. India's influence also spread abroad. Its films, yoga, food, and music reached global audiences. Bollywood stars were recognized worldwide. Indian doctors, engineers, and scientists worked across the globe. Leaders from other countries began to see India as a key partner in world affairs. But then, in 2020, came a challenge the whole world faced: COVID-19. India went into lockdown. Millions lost jobs. Cities fell silent. But India also became the pharmacy of the world. It produced and exported vaccines to many countries, helping in the global fight. The pandemic was painful, but it showed India's resilience. Today, India is the world's most populous country. Its economy is among the fastest growing. It builds digital highways, high-speed trains, and giant expressways. Its startups attract billions in investment. Yet challenges remain: poverty, pollution, inequality, and political divisions. But India's story is not just about problems. It is about possibility. From call centers to space missions, from poverty to progress, from struggle to strength. India's rise in the 21st century is proof this nation is unstoppable. This is the story of modern India, a story of technology, ambition, and resilience. A story of challenges, but also of dreams. A story of 1 billion voices, building one future. The rise of modern India has only just begun.